G-Stash and G-Martian, Gabstracted from wherever you guys are in the world. It's the week after DevCon, so I guess the sentiment across CT has never been higher, and the feedback I got before this episode surrounding DevCon very much ties into today's theme, which is going to be apps, consumer crypto. Usually we pass these podcasts at the bottom of the infra stack, but today we're going up to the top, and we're joined by Simon and Sam. Simon is the CEO and founder of Eclipse Fi, and Sam is the Chief Business Development Officer over at Eclipse Fi as well. Look, guys, usually on these podcasts, we get really deep into the tech, and we sort of dive right down the stack and have a look at things like chain abstraction and sort of modular designs and sort of what's powering, the future of crypto. But today, I'm really excited to get you guys on because we can come up for some air, if you like, and have a bit of a conversation that's really, I guess, at the forefront of the industry right now is where are the apps, where are the experiences? People love to make that claim. Of course, us in infra keep saying that, you wouldn't build a house on dodgy foundations. So going to be really good to sort of rip your thoughts apart and see, you guys deal with consumers every single day. So excited to rip into all of that. But before we do, let's just get here's Peter swinging in. GM Peter.
Hey guys.
Stream
bomb. Nice
little stream bomb. Love a little
nice to meet you, sir.
Peter, we're just going to kick off as usual. Simon, maybe we'll hand over the mic to you. A little background on your industry. I mean, you've been in the industry for years. You've been building communities for 5+ years. So I'd love to sort of dive into where you got started in all of this.
Yeah, heavy. I've been in crypto since 2016. Obviously I went through ICO summer. I went through the ICO period, made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, experienced it all. Kind of reminds me a bit of the meme season at the moment, actually. There's definitely some correlations to the ICO days and how it feels compared to kind of what the memes are going on. It was kind of Wild West, random things would pump, and it was just pretty nuts. Went through like 2018, 2019, trading on BitMEX. Craziness, got deeper into the space, and then obviously came into DeFi summer, where DeFi summer was Wild West as well, but it was very exciting to see kind of what was coming around crypto. And then we got into the last bull run, which got pretty nuts as well, and metaverse and NFTs and everything, and everybody jumping into the space and all the craziness. I actually ended up then gravitating into Terra ecosystem. Funny enough, it started off by distrust in USDT. It was really interesting. I was like a bit wary of USDT for a period of time, and I was like, this thing could kind of blow up at any point. I was a bit skeptical, and I was like, been playing around a lot with DeFi, and I was like, I want to find vaults or places I can park my capital now that I made a bunch of money that I could insure that would be kind of safe from USDT. And then I found UST, right, and Terra and Anchor, and I delved deep into that. Like hindsight, that was a bad move, but in that period of time, I really enjoyed actually Terra. One of the biggest things that attracted me to Terra was the apps building were like a lot more intuitive. They felt like apps that were going to be built for real people. Not saying that all the apps in Terra were for everyday people, but like everybody was thinking with an expansionless mindset of apps that would be integrated into regular world. There was applications like Alice Finance and Cardo and some of these others that would take the APIs of crypto DeFi apps and then integrate them into these regular Web 2 payment applications or savings applications. And they'd really thought through, how do you actually bring the benefits of DeFi to the people? Even though it was a giant Ponzi and, it all blew up, it was very interesting to see it through that lens. I actually, ended up working for a DeFi protocol and ended up building the whole education for the for the Terra ecosystem. So TFL funded about $1.8 million to build out 200 animated videos. And the goal was to build like a learn-to-earn platform that would walk people through sort of not just what the space is, but a bit of the why. Why does Bitcoin exist, and what is the potential of DeFi? And it was sort of working people through not just the, hey, here's the tech, this is what it does, but really through like, what is this going to enable and why does it make sense? What is a blockchain in a very simple way, and how does it apply, and how does it have value and everything like that. So I went through that craziness, lost a ton of money in the Terra collapse. And that was very humbling experience. But, the fight for me wasn't over. Like, I think I saw the potential for DeFi. I saw the potential for consumer apps, if you like, and what DeFi or what crypto could bring to the wider world. And we went into a bit of a holding pattern for some time, but I went off and started building Eclipse Fi. Started off as a launch pad and started really figuring out how to fix the launch space, and it's sort of evolved from that. But I still hold my premise that I think that blockchain and DeFi hasn't really seen its final version in the world, and I think the space has come a long way now, and I think it's now we're coming up to the time where I think we can start bringing that to everyday people. And some of the benefits of this is going to really transform how we do everything. We just haven't really reached that maturity in that just yet. So, yeah, it's a bit of my journey, a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm super excited to rip it apart, especially the way that you're looking sort of at consumers and users in the space now. But I just want to get your thoughts really quickly before we move on. You mentioned the ICO era and just like some of the projects that were getting launched and some of like the amount of money that was going into these projects, like that just didn't need to be on chain. Like it was just like you could bring an idea on chain and like everyone was getting behind it, right? And then that's kind of you related that to sort of the meme kind of coin era, I guess, that we're going through at the moment. What's your kind of take on this like AI meta at the moment where everyone's kind of launching these like, AI agent coins, and it feels a little bit memey? Like there's definitely a deeper story with AI on the blockchain. We're doing a lot of great stuff at the moment with AI Oracle programs on SEDA, but this kind of what we're seeing on crypto Twitter now feels very just like another like attention span grabbing moment for the industry while we wait for maturity. How are you seeing that?
I think it just seems to always happen with crypto, right? Like the front running is always interesting. So like it's a genuine long-term use case, but the speculation front runs the value. Same thing with DeFi, to be fair. Like DeFi was mega overvalued for some time. And now you've seen it go through this really long maturing process, not in every area, but in some kind of elements. And it's so interesting how I feel like this happens like everywhere across crypto. It's like even like at the start of Deepin, it doesn't mean that not everything is valuable, but it's sort of like there's this huge narrative around it before it's even matured and ready. And sort of everyone jumps on. So yeah, it's quite interesting. I think it's similar in that front. I think there's definitely like a lot for AI and AI agents, but as you said, it feels a bit like there's a bubble that forms. And actually everything, it's not just crypto work like this. If you look at the .com boom, right? Like so much stuff came out of the .com boom, but that was kind of a meme bubble, right? It was people speculating on the future, but almost everything during the .com boom sort of blew up and didn't exist anymore. And then there was a maturing that happened after the fact. So it's quite interesting, but I think maybe that's just the nature of speculation and assets somewhat.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sorry, I just found out that we're actually not streaming anywhere because I can get the platform to work. So it's not actually linked to any of these platforms. So we're doing this old school style. We're recording this right now, so we can drop the full version at another day. But just so you let your communities know, because I'm just getting messages now that it's not coming through anywhere. And I couldn't get the restream to generate, so I'm not sure what's going on. But we'll just cut this little section out.
I'll tell them stream not going to work?
Yeah, just tell them that we'll drop the full episode once we're done recording. It takes like 5 minutes to download, and then I can drop it live. So just say it's going to be on at 3 p.m. CET.
Okay, 3 p.m. CET, whatever. CET. Yeah. I'm sure some of our community are sad because they were waiting to grill someone with questions. I think Dante was waiting to drop about 50 million questions.
Tell him he can do it in the TG. We'll be watching. But anyway, we'll keep trucking ahead. Super excited to dive in sort of more on those consumer stuff. Before we do, Sammy, I'll throw across to you. Thanks for coming on the space today, man. I know you're out there hustling for the bull run, but would love just to give the people who are going to be watching it a little bit on your background and kind of while you do that, like you talk to projects every single day. I mean, that's the bread and butter of your job, kind of just how you sort of see the industry now as we're heading into a bull run, some of the projects you're coming across.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. So I think overall, initially background in finance and economics, and started off at a VC firm as an analyst, then made my way pretty quickly into the crypto world as a consultant, and then eventually leading BD for Yieldly Finance, which was a pretty strong DeFi protocol back in the day, built on Algorand. One of the first DeFi protocol there, and then made my way into an on-chain credit solution, a club DEX as well on Aptos. It's always been around the DeFi plays. Always piqued my interest. is more so looking at the investment side of crypto and trying to understand like what is the actual plays behind the closed doors and how they actually work. And then just towards the start of this year, I got pulled in by Simon and the team at Eclipse to come in and lead the BD department here, which ultimately at the start was looking at the launchpad arm of Eclipse. Now we're transitioning into that DeFi side as well, so looking at expanding the role. But in that launchpad side, it's been pretty interesting. I was looking the other day, I think it's like 350 or 400 deals that I've done due diligence on in the past 8 to 10 months. So it's been pretty interesting.
What percentage of those projects did you say like got through the due diligence process, right? Because everyone tries to jump on the bandwagon.
I think it depends. It's like if you include the ones that are pretty quick reject, there'd be close to probably 1,000 projects that are reviewed. But I think the telltale signs of a shady project these days is pretty clear and pretty apparent. As now we're entering that stage, now we're also looking at VC-backed projects that are becoming shadier with the tokenomics or with the way that the backdoor dealings are done. So as someone I found out this year, it's been a very interesting journey for those projects that have passed. It would generally be a handful, maybe 50 or less, that do pass. And that's one aspect is we do due diligence pretty thoroughly to the point where it's equivalent to tier 1 VC. But at the same time, if we did reduce that back and look to help support projects that might tick 4 out of the 5 boxes, it still is quite hard to launch these guys. Probably the most apparent is doesn't matter what your focus or what industry you're trying to push, it still depends on your ability to generate hype and to differentiate product to go-to-market strategy and token go-to-market strategy. Understanding that the token go-to-market, even if you're a legitimate project and you tick all the boxes, if you don't have that token go-to-market, you're going to be shot for your TG event. So understanding that you do have to tap into those hype plays, whether it be Nomad or Bearer or Bloom, or those top KOLs as well that are circulating, and knowing that you still need to have those partnerships coming through and you still need to be talking to the right VCs in order to get that success. So it's been a journey for sure. Been interesting, especially for this last 8-10 months of the bear that we've just endured. It's been a very, very challenging time for a lot of projects to try and, one, raise on good terms, and then two is to trying to launch through those predatory environments to do so. But I think within that is the problems that have risen. There's always opportunities there for solutions. So it's given us a very clear vision about what our 2025 wants, what we want it to look like, and what we think the industry needs, which is reflective of what you and Simon were saying before. Just quickly, is you're looking at those projects that AI agents or those more quickly built up memes at the moment, and they might not have a longevity for the future. But you look at someone like SEDA, or you look at someone like Neutron, and it's your teams are there building for the long term. Your 10-year vision. You're not just a 2-year vision or a quick flip. So there's two very different worlds being played. You've got those very strong chains. You know, those chains that are phantoms, but you've got those very strong ones that are saying, well, don't worry about that hype or the new narrative or whatever the crazy thing is at the moment. We know what we're doing. We know where the industry is going to go. We don't want to be part of the explosion of the .com boom, but we want to be around for long term. So it's cool.
It's just super good take, because Peter, actually, this is a really good segue into you, because I know you've been building in the space for a very, very long time, not just with SEDA, but also in the app layer as well. Sam, what you're saying is basically like there's almost these segments we throw this word around user, right, all the time, crypto user, crypto consumer, but there are so many slices to that pie of what the user is. There's those users that now are just looking for the next shiny thing, and they're playing the game, right, that we see across crypto Twitter, and they play that game very well. Then there's people that, are looking at the viable outcomes of this industry for a long period of time, that want to know, well, who are the real players, who are building the real things that are going to be here in 5-10 years, or are going to support the app experiences that will carry on for 5 to 10 years out. You know what I mean? So that kind of sort of sets us up almost into segment 1 of this whole conversation, is like, how do you kind of see the consumer space right now? It's changed so much since DeFi summer, from where we are. So Peter, I'd love, like, obviously your little background, but to get your take on that as someone who's been in the industry for, many, many years. You're on mute.
Thanks. I'm Peter. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SEDA. So we started building at the very top of the application layer. We built, one of the first apps for derivatives on startups. and slowly built down infrastructure as the infra we were building on just wasn't cutting it for what we believed would provide like a mainstream experience. I think that the consumer that I saw like in 2017 and 2018 is very different than today. I think that the people who were using applications and getting into crypto back in the day were really like enthusiasts, right? So they were people that were kind of interested in technology, and then were playing around with like what was possible. And I remember when one of our first investors got me into crypto, and he was like, hey, like, drop what you're building in like Web 2, like you should build in Web 3. And like, there's this cool thing in crypto, there's this thing called Ethereum. And I remember playing around with a smart contract called Ether Roll. And actually, way before the derivatives on startups and even everydApp.com, which was the first project I started, which was like an app store basically for dApps in 2017, I actually built a horse racing smart contract. So basically, it was built as like a fork of Ether Roll, and you could essentially put money on like horse, and then like the smart contract would determine random speeds and like finishing times, and then do a payout. And I remember just like playing with Ether Roll, this like very first dApp on Ethereum, and I was like, this is really cool, but like, I don't think any of my friends will ever want to use this, right? Like, there's sort of no real purpose besides like gambling, right, to use this application. And I was like, but I can send like $50,000 from like this wallet to another one on like a Sunday, and there's no bank involved, and there's nothing that needs to happen to power this. So like, this is really cool. I think this will be something in years from now. And I think that the consumer that's coming in today, like, I think one of the greatest examples of this, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. I think it's called like, maybe it's Outer Limits or something like that. I think that there's like this, I forget the name of it, but there's this game that like reached the top charts. And I remember when crypto in gaming used to be like every single transaction was like on chain for like in game. So like, if you want to like move to a new area, you have to like submit an on-chain transaction to do so. And I remember thinking like, no one wants to play this. Like, nobody's going to use this. Like, nobody wants to do like an on-chain transaction to record like every single state in the game. But that was like a precursor to now what we have is like all the items, all the in-game items are like stored as NFTs. So you can trade them and you have like full ownership of them. And this is the first time we've seen like a game where like everybody came in, and just like I put, I don't know, $100 on my Steam wallet, and it's now like in Steam in this like virtual Steam currency, I can do the same thing in crypto. And so for the consumer, they're able to actually like onboard in a very similar flow to what they're expecting from Steam and other random gaming platforms, but be able to actually like own, interact with like games and the items that they use. And I think that that's like kind of the shift that we're seeing now is like we have blockchain technology powering experiences rather than the blockchain being the experience itself. And that's sort of my take on where consumers are coming in now.
Yeah, I think, is it Kevin from Kalani puts this really well, is like, we started off in a chain-centric environment, which made a lot of sense because at some point there was basically just the chain that kind of existed, and it was just such a direct portal to your experience was on the chain. And now we're moving into 2025 is going to be the app-centric or the user-centric on-chain landscape. So to sort of set the discussion up on that, we're streaming live now, by the way. So we sorted that out after the fact. We're on SEDA, which is cool. Simon, you're obviously very kind of bullish on DeFi. I want to just jump to the future a little bit. We've talked a lot about like chain abstraction and modular infra, alt VMs being more expressive for apps. But the one thing that we never seem to be able to answer to my satisfaction in these infra conversations that we have is, well, what are the apps going to be? I mean, you guys talk to consumers every day. You guys have a very consumer-facing experience. So you have the users of crypto in your Telegram. That's, it's always very busy, people giving their 2 cents worth. What do you see coming, or what are kind of like the experiences that you expect to see 6 months from now, 12 months from now?
Yeah, this is quite a broad question because there's a lot of different, I guess there's a lot of different avenues you can take things. If you can look at DeFi, and you could look at, everyone's talking about other things like, de-science and everything. There's so many areas, but for me, I think that like what I would love to see at least, or what I think will happen, especially if we take DeFi, is that, we've had quite I'd say we've had quite complex DeFi applications until now. And it's taken some time for some of these to mature and build up. But I would love to see like some of these puzzle pieces working together a lot more closely, and then having abstraction on top of it. So I think a lot about what happens in Web 2, where you have like these institutions that are sort of using all these complex DeFi protocols, and they are hedging and doing sorts of things with it, and then that then gets simplified so that the product that the end user uses, they're not like going into all the complexities of it. And so I think that's where I really think about like all these primitives, like, you look at the pendles and you look at various protocols like that, being able to strip, you take one yield strategy that's based on trading, and then you strip it, and then you offer like fixed yield. And suddenly you can then, if you create enough scalability with this, enough liquidity, you can then offer like a fixed yield vault to an end user. Right, and they don't need to interact with Pendle. They don't need to interact with all these underlying complexities. But the DeFi primitives, as they're built up, and as they, as you introduce other kind of opportunities and sources of yield into there, you open up like the ability for people in a simple way to go, hey, I want to get these opportunities, but I don't need to interact with, maybe they're getting higher yield than they would by leaving that in their bank account, or higher yield than they can get in Web 2. And now it's still very early. Still a lot of liquidity and a lot of volume to be built up. But that's sort of how I think a bit of like the DeFi applications. I love to see them start to get abstracted so that the end user can get access to some components, and then you have more institutional, sophisticated people that come in to the ground level. I'd love to see, like obviously as Peter mentioned before with like swords and marketplaces, I'd love to see more different types of marketplaces come about that are more abstracted. I think the really big key of all of this, like whether you're building, decentralized GoFundMe or decentralized, marketplaces, is like, how does decentralization or tokenization actually add value to the product? How does it add an improved experience? Because in the past, one of the big issues was like, hey, we're going to decentralize this social application. We're going to do this sort of stuff, but you add such a complexity to it that people aren't going to take the extra steps to come in and use it. Like, people don't want to take. People are inherently like are looking for paths of least resistance, so they're not going to come in and use something that adds all this extra complexity. As Peter said, only the enthusiasts are going to do that. But if you can abstract that out, and then through decentralization, through tokenization, through all these elements, you can add elements to products. You can start to create like competitive experiences from what the alternatives of those products are in the real world. Right? Whether it's token mechanisms that create new loyalty and funnel back value throughout the system, or whether decentralization adds kind of an element of a censorship resistance or something you can't do generally. I think that's where we'll see kind of applications go. I think there's a long way to go in terms of innovation of applications. I'd love to see more kind of in the insurance space. Anything that kind of breeds off like having more transparency is going to be helpful. I think like voting, for example, like more voting on related applications, and there's a whole range of different ones we could like really go into. But I think that now that abstraction is coming out, it's going to enable for these applications that don't create friction for the end users. And if we don't create friction for the end users, we can then look at what makes sense to build with, blockchain, what doesn't, what benefits from tokenization, what doesn't, and how do you differentiate like a blockchain app from another. I think, who just launched an application, a social application? Was it a competitor to Twitter? It must have been, what's his name? The initial founder of Twitter. Jack Dorsey. I think they recently launched like a decentralized social platform competing to Twitter. So I haven't dug too much into it, but these kind of things are going to become more possible, I think, over time. It's going to be really interesting.
I think there's one thing that like people forget in crypto, which is that in the end, like building a successful consumer app, like there is, I don't know, there's no like killer, in my opinion, there's no killer use case in crypto, right? There are use cases that people want to use, or like things that people want to do, and applications that enable them to do that. And any sort of friction becomes meaningless if you want it bad enough, right? So like, I think like if you look at, I don't know, like something like Twitter as an example, right? Like I joined Twitter like as a user, I don't know, in like 2018 or something like that, because crypto was like at that point, like all on Twitter already. And so I was like, okay, I have to make a Twitter now to like be in the space and understand what's going on. And in the beginning, like I had to understand the features. I'd like understand like, you know, the character limits and like all these things. And eventually I was able to, you know, get onboarded, right? It took, you know, probably, I don't know, an hour to like fully understand the app, right? Crypto applications can sometimes be much more difficult, but in the end, like there needs to be a reason for the user to want to use an application. And I think that DeFi has always been about yield, right? So the reason was money. If you can make money using this application, whether it's like an airdrop or like yield or something, then the user would come in and use it. I think that what we've seen from like the DeFi summer is like these short-term incentives are just that, they're short-term, right? So when you have an application launch and they use like yield farming to attract users, it only worked for a little while until like, you know, that malicious kind of like mercenary capital then leaves your platform and jumps to the next one. And I think that to go back to this gaming example, like the use case is the game, right? The feature that is powered by crypto is like the items in that game. And I think that that's kind of like where I see more crypto applications in the future is like the friction point is payments, right? Like I want to send money from like, I don't know, the United States or Europe to like Australia. And to do that with a bank is going to cost me like, you know, whatever, $1,000, and it's going to like take a bunch of time and I have to go in the branch in person, to, like sign a document to do so. But in crypto, like, you know, Matt already has it. Like by the time I was done with that sentence, like it arrives in Matt's account, right? In USDC. I think that's kind of like where I see the next wave of consumer applications in crypto is like the applications that focus on creating like a long-term experience for the user and creating like a long-term incentive for them to keep coming back and not just kind of like, you know, mercenary incentive. That's where I'm excited about use cases, in my opinion.
I also think that, yeah, Simon, you pointed to this as like what needs to be tokenized, right? Like when you talk about like long-term experiences, Peter, not every experience needs to have its own token either, but some experiences lend themselves to being on chain. They have benefits for being on chain that aren't the cryptocurrency that maybe you use in that experience, right? And this is something that when we talked to Bird Zion, we highlighted, and it was around having like USDC as kind of like a main token on chain for a lot of these sort of, maybe we'll call them V1 applications that come sort of next year in the chain abstracted world. You know, you don't have to pay gas. You know, you're not managing multiple tokens. You're kind of doing a lot of these experiences just with stable coins, which I think is like, you know, it's a very great way to onboard people. It's super familiar from day one. And so when I start to think about like, okay, so what does the consumer crypto experience look like? It's probably going to look very similar to how you use a phone, right? You have a bunch of apps on your phone. Some of those phones are banking apps. Some of them are like economic apps. Some of them are gaming apps. Some of them are utility apps, you know, and you're going to have all these experiences that you do in one place. So I always think about that with like consumer crypto. There's some experiences that'll come on where I go there to play a game and it's more to have fun and yeah, just use USDC if I want to buy an in-game item. Like I don't have to, as a project building these apps, I don't have to worry about kind of the psychology or the emotional attachment around my token and the value that token brings to the user and maintaining that aspect. I can focus on a great experience, which like, you know, just cut the fluff a little bit. It's like, that's what people come to use a product for, as Peter was saying, is like they come to use an experience. So give a great experience. And then maybe we can evolve into these areas, right? Like you can explore product market fit. The same way that like we look at SEDA right now is like, we said this morning that the best thing about SEDA is not the network itself. It's what people are going to do on it, right? Because you can build anything when you get access to any type of data. So what are the apps that are going to come out? We don't know. We're excited to see where people take that. And I think that's the same approach that we need to take with like apps coming out in 2025 is like, let's see what comes out and let's see the direction that the user takes it, but let's make it as familiar and intuitive for the user first so that we have enough onboarding to actually give ourselves direction to then go, okay, cool, we need to like sort of, you know, double down on this or improve the experience over here. We've now come into these problems. Now we need to solve those, right? Sam, I'd be curious to sort of see your kind of take on that, having talked
one sec, just while you're on that with tokens, one thing that I do like with tokens in general is like, I think one of the big flaws is that they can overshadow a poor product or poor experience because you're throwing incentives into something that you shouldn't have, that doesn't have like natural organic stickiness. But what I do like about tokens is that, I mean, like, you know, sometimes you play a video game, you know, back in the day, like Farmville or some of these others, and you could kind of create some cool gamification stuff in there and you could use them for various things. So I think thinking token second rather than token first, but then also seeing where they can be used within products to both improve products, or to improve loyalty through different ways to drive specific behaviors. But they could be also like, hey guys, come and give feedback about this product or whatever and get some tokens, and just kind of use them as like a product improvement thing and a way that we create gamification within the app, rather than like, hey, I've got a bad product. The token is like substitute for the bad product. But how do we actually then use them to share value, use them for like stickiness, and play around with different mechanisms and gamification in the background? I think that's kind of cool, right? I think that's stuff that I get excited about. But instead, we've got this whole like token first approach, that the token is the only thing keeping people around and earning more of the token. And like you just basically gloss over having a terrible product. It's like what they say about like over raising. You raise too much money and you put it into marketing, you can make a bad product look good for long enough to, to carry through, but your product isn't got product market fit. So the same thing with tokens. If you don't have product market fit, you're using your token to kind of gloss over that, then you're bound to fail. And there's a lot of times where the token doesn't make sense. But I would love to play a lot more with the different uses of tokens and the ways they kind of enhance products instead of like gloss over them.
I think all these are like, in the end, it's like a dopamine chase, right? So whether it's like these use cases, and I think like whether it's entertainment, right, like games, or whether it's making money, like greed, right? They translate into like one thing, and that's like a dopamine hit. And I think I totally agree with you, Simon. Like sometimes tokens are used as like this instant, like short-term dopamine provider, right? Where like the community can kind of rally around it. But I think that, if you don't have like long-term utility, right, like a reason for this token to exist, it's just like a short-term, sort of distraction from maybe other things in your product that don't work very well. And I think, like a good example, I think, to look at this is like Polymarket, right? Like they had a lot of traction through the election. Their product doesn't work like super well. If you like talk about like a mainstream application versus like Polymarket, it's not like they built like 100x better experience for trading. It's just like, it just works basically, and there's a chart. But the difference, I think, for what I saw, like if you look at Kalshi versus Polymarket, like I saw the Kalshi founder responding like to users that were like, hey, I wired money like yesterday and it still isn't in my account. And he's like, yeah, thanks. It can take like, between like 3 to 6 business days sometimes for like ACH wires to land on our account. And the user was like, but the election ends tomorrow. Like, so like I want to bet on it right now, right? And I think that, in the end, if you can create like experiences that make it easier for the user to get to that kind of like gratification that they want from that product, from using that product, and Chain Abstraction does this, right? Like you guys were saying earlier in the space, like by making the experience easier, you remove all these barriers that stand in the way for the user to get to that gratification of using that product. And so I think that that's kind of where I see for the consumer in crypto is like, I can have them like make a particle network account or like one balance or whatever it may be, and they're all of a sudden able to start using all these applications, and it's very easy. They don't need to like manage gas and all these things. So I think, if you can get long-term incentives mixed with like removing barriers for UX, it like creates this very deadly combination, for traction, basically.
100%. The CEO from Virtual Human Studios, who did Zrun on it was originally in Web3 gaming years ago. I always remember when he said to me, he said, the metric our North Star metric is time to fun. If I can minimize that time to fun, then we'll succeed. No matter what the experience is in, as long as someone wants it and it's easy to get to, that time to fun metric is going to determine, how many people we get through this app. And it's very powerful for gaming, but now it's even powerful for developers, right? I mean, we build Oracle infrastructure. For the average person, that might glaze their eyes over. But then when you tell a developer that, you don't have to do this in 6 months, your time to fun is now 97 seconds to get that Oracle feed out there, get that data and get that execution request and go and see that data on the Explorer, that's a massive step forward for the industry. So I think, that kind of time to fun element, that ability just to get in and give an experience, it's not reinventing the wheel at the end of the day. This is exactly what the Web 2 world does, right? They get you into an app and they get you using the experience and generally has some kind of gratification, up front. So again, I think it comes back to like finding that product market fit and then just saying, well, how do we limit those frictions? How do we mitigate those frictions? Chain Abstraction is doing it with getting rid of gas, getting rid of token management, just one entry into apps. But Sammy, I was going to pivot to you before. I wanted to get your take on sort of how the projects that you're looking forward to onboarding next year, so how they're looking at the user space now? Because you alluded before in the podcast about kind of these shady projects, I think you called them. But what I wanted to get to is that you see the user is a totally different user now. They can't have the hood pulled over their eyes, so to speak, as easy now. Like a lot of people are aware of kind of the tricks that have been, people have gotten away with back in 2020, 2021. There's a different type of user now. How do you see the sort of the consumer mind from the project's point of view?
I think it's twofold. You've still got those users that are looking for that quick gratification, and they're still focused on high plays. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, we're still in, like, one of the main aspects of crypto is trying to make money. But it's if you do look at the idea of tokenization and what will bring money back on chain, is it retail, or is it institutions? And I think institutions have to lead it first, which where tokenization, RWA, and that whole pitch makes sense. You look at AI, it's a pretty strong narrative at the moment, but it's, as you're saying, like, for a consumer, there's a project at the moment that's just raised at a 2.5 billion valuations. It's a chunk of money. You're looking like, wow, how can you justify this? And then they're going to go push out and do a node sale. You look at that node sale and you're like, why would retail go and get involved in that in the first place? And it's like, well, because we've got tier 1 VCs on our cap table and we've got these KOLs. And it's like, yeah, but they're so aware, like, it's been a full year of being bled dry from these guys. So if you look at it from non-pessimistic or non-like beat down approach, and you actually look at what will work, I think it's what is exciting for next year, and it might not come quickly because there is a lot of infrastructure at the moment, but it's looking at the token utility as being actually essential. And Outlier Ventures do this really well, where they've got a massive portfolio, but in that portfolio, there's not a whole lot of them that are pushing for TG events, and they're telling their teams to slow down and don't focus on the token, and token should come second. It's about finding that product market fit. And that's, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of projects. So when you do look at that approach, it's the right mindset for longevity. It's saying that you're not here to make quick money to get that quick gratification, or to come up with a product that's kind of clunky and doesn't quite work just for the purest point of raising the token and getting a bit of extra cash. That TGE event needs to be looked at like an IPO in the traditional markets. For that to happen, we then need the traditional market mentality to come in, which is where institutions play a role in it. Once you start to have a user interface that is applicable for traditional banking and has all the telltale signs of a traditional banking interface, you're going to get a lot more people coming across and being curious about it. So there's still, like we've been talking about, some of the big institutions or funds doing pilot programs, and they've been doing them for many years, and there's still no one stepping forward and being like, we're pushing hard just yet. We're still very immature in our growth. So it's very much a long-term game. There's still a lot of exploration, but yeah, being left to our own devices for so long, to be decentralized, and for the power to the people, we've kind of proved ourselves in the last couple of years that there's still wolves in amongst us that still can prove that there's some level of centralization or regulation is still needed to have a level of control. What a ramble.
No, 100%. I think there's actually two questions that come up from that, right? As Trump in the office, I want to sort of pick your guys' brain, how you sort of seeing the landscape change with him. But before we go in there, do you think that users in crypto, it's an industry where you get so much access to a business compared to like investing in a business in a traditional setting, right? Like you look at news updates, you're not sitting in a mining company's Twitter and Discord, like talking to the CEO of a mining company. It's just not happening. But in crypto, you have this like access to the team that this is, I don't think there's another industry out there that this is the standard of access. Does that give consumers too high of expectations on projects that need time to mature, that are super good, right? Because you have to be able to tell your narrative, prove your product, prove your traction, all these things in such a short period of time in crypto, because if you lose the attention, then people go on to the next thing. Do you think that the expectations from the user is just way too high, or how do we manage that?
I don't, like, I'll start with someone, I know he'll have some great points in this, but I don't think so. I think it's actually it's a level of accountability for founders or for the team. It's like, are you transparent and can you actually deliver on your promises? And something we do look at there, it's like, as I touched on at the very start, there's phantom chains. There's so many projects out there that have raised that are now just sitting there fat stack of cash and they're not doing anything with it. And you look at them, it's like, where's that accountability? And it happens in Web 2 as well. The idea with it being everything publicly displayed is that through that there should be a level of accountability for these teams. So it should be like, okay, yes, you're immature, don't overpromise and undersell. It's like if you think it's going to take you 2 years for the product, say it's going to take you 2 years, but still along the way get that update from the devs and say, you're working on this feature's just gone live, we're still miles away from where we need to be, but we're getting there. And still having that ability to be like, we're still accountable for actions and here's the proof of it along the way, rather than raising a lot of money then just stepping fully away and leaving the investors, the retail, anyone who participated in IDOs or in private rounds, guessing what you're doing with the funds, or going to these events and having some fun parties, but not necessarily stepping away and being like, that was productive. It's just a good time. So, I mean, I went to.
I have the opposite take though. I have the opposite take, Sam. It's the same, but it's different because it's like, is the retail communities actually able to cut through and keep these teams accountable? Because in Web 2, right, and it's just an open question too, like in Web 2, like the VCs are probably a lot more experienced in keeping teams accountable. Your boards, you got legals, you got everything. But in crypto, there's these grifters that get away with these giant raises and dead shades anyway, right? They still go to the parties. They still go and spend millions of dollars in Singapore. And even with the communities around, they're just good marketers. So they manage to like kind of cut through. So do you think like, yes, community needs to be harsher, but do you think that really makes a difference in terms of the accountability held against these teams?
See, this is it's a yes and a no for like. Just to be clear, Sam and I have had this debate many times. For us, because like I push saying that does a user come first, trying to get prove a product market fit and getting the correct user coming in and showing that you've got growth, or is it building the right community and you using them as a funnel and it's like having a loyal base behind you and holding their hand along the journey to make them feel part of the journey the whole way. And someone's always pushed for the community side and I've always pushed for the user side. It's not necessarily one or the other. Often it's both combined. But it's a fair point where is the retail or is the community that you've got, are they actually focused on you and the product? Or are they there for the token and trying to see it pump? And so I think it's a clear differentiation. We were talking to a launchpad, one of the bigger ones recently, and they were saying that they churn over community every 3 months. So if you look at that from a sustainability point of view, it's like, okay, so they're getting in fresh blood, new paycheck for the week. I'm going to put into this IDO. If you look at the IDOs that have launched recently, they've all been burnt pretty hard. Every 3 months, they then turn over with the new community, but they've got very good marketing arm and can appear quite bullish if you look at their socials. So I think it depends on what it is that you're going for.
It also probably depends a lot on the experience of the project, right? Like in an IDO, I can imagine that maybe that makes sense to churn your community over every 3 months, especially if you're launching projects in a bear market and the kind of the sentiment of community is just constantly down because their expectation is that they were going to make heaps of money, but the market conditions are the market conditions, and that just wasn't able to happen. So that they're constantly having to recycle the community. Where coming from like my marketing point of view for SEDA, for example, having been on the team for 12 months. There's chapters to the story and there's a time to look at different users and a time to bring in different people. So for example, at the kind of the big part of this year that we've done really well is like a B2D angle and a B2B angle. So what people probably don't see on like a crypto Twitter thing is all the conversations and the pipeline that our BD and that Peter have been building out that we have, which is a really big business angle, right? Is like we have the data supply now, we have the demand side as well from projects that are going to be using that data, which is setting up the environment to then bring that news to sort of maybe more speculative crowds who are going to get excited around, mainnet's coming up. That's kind of the next big thing for us. They're going to get more excited around that because we have, these stories to tell them. We also have proof of product now. We started integrating into networks. So now maybe the shift focuses, and where at the start of the year, I guess what I'm saying is like, who are our users and how do we win with those users long term? And we create a core community around that. And then maybe other people will come in around big events like mainnet launches, upgrade networks, because for them in their speculative nature, that signals, some kind of traction or movement or whatever, they're taking from that.
It's true, man. It's like, it's reiterating product go-to-market or product marketing, and then token go-to-market or token marketing. If you do have a mainnet coming up, how do you do that transition softly? But how do you do that transition away so much from pushing about the product and transitioning to the green flags or the really hype aspects about the token itself and the token utility once it does go mainnet, treading carefully. But it's like, how do you actually make it seem really bullish and really exciting and get that hype crowd coming back in?
Yeah, 100%. And how to say that in a regulatory way around the around the token. But I think this is a shout out to like a lot of the projects as well out there that are looking at something like, there's always different projects in the spotlight. You know, Peter and I have had this kind of conversation about like, you know, who we saw in the spotlights in like Q1s, Q2s, and then kind of like the sentiment around those projects now, because they chose a different type of playbook that was maybe beneficial more short term than perhaps long term. You know, their products at a different stage, right? And I think a lot of the marketing and community building that really works long term is knowing that you don't need those vanity metrics. You don't need to be in the spotlight all the time, because if you're saying, Sam, if you're starting out and you're just developing a product or a project, let's say infra, and you've got 2 years before that infra is even like usable, if you go hard on the community building at the start, you then have to manage that sentiment and that expectation for 2 years, as opposed to going, let's get our core users who really believe in what we're doing, who are going to be our power users of 100,000, whatever, that we can use for traction later and build a community around those people that need kind of like instant gratification. It goes back to what Peter was saying around like the app experiences, right? It's like you want to give people gratification as quick as possible. Some people who are maybe more tech enthusiasts, you can sustain them the whole story because they're there to watch the development. And it's important that we talk about our products and the development journey and keep them in the loop. And then there's some people who don't really care. They're just here to make money at the end of the day. And that's great too. Like, and they have their time. So I think that's one thing I always like to point out is like, what stage of product are you in, right? You know, it's not that, you know, your community building is bad or anything, but you're maybe at a different stage of your product. Do you need it right now, right? Like, are you building a product community right now? Are you building a token community, right? Because as you said, Sam, there's like 2 different things. I'd love to get your kind of a pushback.
I do agree. I think it comes back to one of the similar topics we talked about before, right? Is the community like a gloss over for a bad product? Right? You could have a really strong community, but if you're not focused on good product, then it doesn't matter. I see community, like obviously we mentioned there's different types of community there. One thing I like with building community and a focus on communities is a source of distribution, right? It's a source of exposure, it's a source of distribution. And if you build that strongly, if you compare that to other marketing channels, sure, there's always going to be like regular marketing, and especially if you're use-based and you want to reach out to people. But I think like a good, strong community that's long-term and built the right way can be a really good amplifier. But again, it's problematic when your community becomes really, really big and your product sucks, right? And you've just built like a cult and you're not improving your product. You're not making a great product. But if you build a great cult and a great product, right, then it can sometimes act as an amplifier for it. So, yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I think about that a lot, where it's like, I mean, it really depends on the niche that you're in as well. It depends on the space, depends on the vertical. Like that all plays a part. But I definitely agree. Like I think those vanity metrics are a big problem. I think a lot of founders in infra or in chain saw that they could like really just pump the numbers just for raising and hype, and then like over raise and just burn a whole bunch of people. And that's you know, not great either. There's a lot more users in crypto than there actually are users. If you compare that to real on-chain metrics, not just super cycles.
I mean, it's fair. I was looking at the Coinbase trading volume today for this quarter and the last 2, and we're still dropping on retail. Institutions picking up, obviously, with the Trump win, but retail it's still not back. It's still very, very low, especially even compared to last year. And last year wasn't too special. We had like a little pump towards the end. But not trying to steal your show, Matty, but no. Peter, I'm super curious. Like, I know you guys in the back end, you're pumping out partnerships and you've got a lot of interested parties. And so look at SEDA. I'm very, very bullish on you guys for the long term. How are you finding the market overall? And when you do go and talk to these projects, is it quite an easy sell for you guys, or like what is the main pain points that you're finding within projects? Obviously, we're at the stage where it's just before launch, and then post launch that we're handling them. So we're on 2 very different stages of a founder's journey, I think.
Yeah, it used to be like, why is SEDA better than Chainlink? Like 2 years ago, because we built this first party Oracle and scaled that from 0 in TVL to over 3.5 billion in 8 weeks. And within 8 weeks, we became the second largest oracle in crypto. And then we couldn't scale it. We were like, this model doesn't make sense. The existing oracle model is broken, and like it's clear that like if there's a real competitor to other oracles, like developers and users want this, like they want it immediately. But we couldn't support more chains. We were live on 3 networks, and we were like, there's no way, unless we charge like $10 million per integration, that we can like reliably scale this in a secure way fast. And if we want to scale slowly, it's going to take like 6 to 9 months, right, to launch on like every new chain. And we made the bet that modularity was going to be like a big thing, right? So back when we built this oracle, you know, we said, okay, there's like 5 or 6 networks, like L2s were kind of a thing, but there was just like just Arbitrum and Optimism, and it wasn't super interesting at that point. But we said, like, what happens if building a network is easier than it is today? Like, as I remember back in 2018, it's funny, I remember I saw a tweet from Solana earlier today talking about like how early were you into Solana? And I remember like being at a panel in San Francisco in 2018 with Anatoly and Alex from Near, and they were talking about like sharding versus like history-based consensus. And in general, like back then you had to like build your own consensus algorithm and like make a stand for the next like 20 years that like you were correct. This is like the best way to achieve like scalability and create like a good blockchain and blah 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 blah. And now it's like I don't know, like I was talking to my brother, and one of his son's friends who's like 14 is like running Monero miners on like an old Chromebook from his siblings. And I was like, how did he find out about it? He was like, yeah, like one YouTuber that he follows is talking about like Monero and like does demos on like how to run a node. And I'm like, holy shit, like what's gonna happen when like this next generation that's like, you know, totally internet enabled, right, and like is super used to learning a lot of their information from like all these different like online sources rather than kind of like, you know, focusing on one thing like a degree from college, but they can instead hyper focus on exactly what they want to, you know, do. What happens when they can just like start launching blockchains immediately, right? And that's like what we're seeing now is like probably by the end of this call and like the 3 minutes that we have, like we could go to Caldera and set our, you know, parameters and launch a network by the end of this call, right? It's that easy now. And the problem before was that like, you know, you needed to have an oracle, right? So, you know, to get users to your chain, you need interop, right? So you need somebody to do verify, you know, settlements and verify intent. So you need an oracle in the first place, or you trust like a centralized relayer, which obviously that's not why we're in this industry, is have like a one of two multi-sig. And then you need an oracle to build applications, right? So if you want people to be able to have sticky applications, they need a connection point to Web 2. And so there's this really big changing point from like 3 years ago when we kind of went down this path of just building oracles. And, you know, SEDA has been like a culmination of 2 years of, you know, trying to build an oracle that's not just like a little bit faster or a little bit better than like Pyth or Redstone or Chainlink. It's like we've gone so much further past that, and we've actually built like an agnostic generalized data layer that can power any data use case, right? And on any chain. And so rather than deploying SEDA to every single network, we said like, okay, we might have like thousands of networks in the future and millions of applications and billions of data points on chain. Let's build a product that we believe can be accessible from anywhere. So we made SEDA as like a generalized network for data accessible from any chain. So the conversation's gone from like, how are you different from Chainlink to like, oh, Chainlink is just like an application specific oracle for price feeds, and SEDA is an oracle that powers like any use case, right? And so I think that, you know, that's kind of the difference that we have in sort of like this market and our edge today. And in general, you know, Matt was in our like our Slack yesterday talking about like all these hackathon submissions and like all these cool projects that are submitting, and like the sort of ideas that developers are coming with, like creating like fully autonomous AI agents that are powered by like chat GPT requests checking, or like Grok checking like tickers on like, you know, Solana on like pump.fun, and when they find like a good one, the AI agent like automatically buys the token, and, you know, creating use cases that like, use weather data to verify a natural disaster happened, and then like releasing funds, for humanitarian support. Like these are things that like I can't even think of, right? As like the founder of SEDA, I'm just like, we're going to try to build a platform that anyone can build on top of. So I think like, from us, like, yeah, there's been a ton of work in the back end. There's been a ton of preparation over the past couple of years. And I think that, in the broader community, like people are going to be pretty surprised by like what SEDA can power as we go live over the next couple of months. And I think already on our DevNet, like we see these really cool use cases being built. And I think that in the end, like, a lot of crypto is like, oh, we forked this and like added this incentive to like use our product, right? And I think that with oracles, it was a lot of like, yes, we're basically Chainlink, but like we'll try to support you faster, right? Than Chainlink will do it, or we'll try to do it for cheaper. And with SEDA, we're like, there's no integration fee. You can deploy your own feed in 90 seconds, and you can do any data type, and you can build any type of customization or configurability for how you consume and actually aggregate that data. And then, publish on any network, right? It's like fully accessible. So I think, to go back to your original question, like the market, I think, is starting to understand SEDA, but it's a no-brainer for these developers because they're like, hey, we just launched an L2 or we have like this product that we're building on this like new network. We need access to oracles, and they go to legacy oracles and they say that'll be, 1 to 2 million for support and, up to $1 million per feed that you need. And we'll put you in our pipeline. Like we'll get live within the next 9 to 12 months. Yeah, exactly. And we're like, hey, you can do this like tonight. Like you want to hop on a quick 30-minute call? We'll have you like fully set up, right? And so I think that like for builders, like you said, like can the community hold projects accountable, right? And one of the biggest problems is that community doesn't understand, and a lot of times like the work that goes behind the scenes to actually like make a project work. And as an example, for a lot of DeFi protocols or like even just like launching a new network, if you can't get access to like reliable off-chain data, you're fully blocked, or you build it like in a centralized way, right? So, what I'm curious to see is like a lot of these L2s that are like, we're on testnet forever, right? Like we're doing points forever, right? Like we'll be launching at some point in, 2025, TM, maybe 2026. But we've raised 400 million from A16Z, so like trust us, right? I'm curious what happens with that, right? Like, when users actually get access, like if you can deploy a chain really quickly and you don't need to spend hundreds of millions, and this is the thing as well, right? Like if you can go to Caldera and launch a roll up in like, 30 minutes, like what do you need all the VC funding for, right? In the end, then the VC funding is for like, making that L2 application specific so you power a certain niche in a certain use case. But you don't need like Solana and Near, like they needed a lot of money to build their core consensus because like they invented something totally new. But now it's just like developers like can just come and deploy, right? And then SEDA for interop and powering, chain abstraction and also, normal things like price feeds and any API data. I think that's going to be like a game changer in my opinion.
It reminds me, sorry, you guys, Sammy.
No, go bro.
Reminds me of what Connor from Enzo was saying, Peter, when we talked with him, right? Is like he's got this vision of like 2 devs coming in and just shipping apps on the weekend, right? And like this thing around funding that you're talking about is super interesting because if I can come into an on-chain environment and ship an app in a weekend, what do I need $500 million for? What do I need $2 million for, right? Like the app should then theoretically start generating an experience and going from there, which I guess kind of like to follow on from what you're saying, Peter, is going to take that kind of focus and the tribalism, whatever that we talk about often on the chain-centric view of the world. And as we move up to an app-centric view of the world, we're going to have, that's it. You ship a good app, you get users. That's the bottom line, right? Because all the infra is kind of there now.
I mean, look at Augur, right? Like, for those that don't know that name, might be listening in, like they were like the first, I guess Gnosis, like prediction markets were the first, but Augur, I think, was the second to launch. They were like one of the first ICOs on Ethereum, and their product was a prediction market, like Polymarket, but their whole reason for existing was like, we're building this dispute resolution mechanism on top of Ethereum that's kind of like, an altruistic, optimistic oracle, right? That can like resolve any query. And so they had to raise a bunch of money to like try to build this infrastructure to like power prediction markets. And then, now you have something like, Polymarket, and you'll see like and we saw probably like 15 or 20 different prediction markets launch, and I kept seeing a ton of decks from founders like being sent over, like, hey, we're like launching this prediction market for this vertical. And it was kind of cool to see because we were, building day-to-day prediction market with, this derivatives on startups app, and now the infrastructure is there that you can just like do it really quick. You don't need to build that whole stack. But I think that like just to piggyback on what you just said, Matt, like you no longer need to build all of the infrastructure that sits below the application. You can just like build what you want to provide users and not have to focus on everything else. And so it shortens time to market. It reduces the amount of funding that you need to accomplish your goal. And it also, just kind of like weeds out the people who are serious and not, right? Like you don't need to raise a bunch of money to create products anymore. And you can create them very easily. And when you get traction, you can go raise a bunch of money to double down on what's getting you that traction and, kind of continue to focus on those experiments, but you don't need that money up front. It's like creating a more sustainable and I think organic environment for funding in the space.
Yeah, 100%. I think we have a thread coming out today that's talking about programmable tools are the blank canvas for developers. If you want them to create, don't make them build the easel, right? Like if you want them to paint a picture on a canvas, don't make them build the whole thing that holds the canvas, right? They're not going to do it. They're not going to come and paint on that. I mean, we've run over, guys, so I don't want to keep you guys too long, but I do want to give you guys 5 minutes to talk about what you guys are doing at Eclipse, because you're steamrolling your direction for 2025. You said at the start of the call, you started off in IDOs and you've been doing some launches throughout the year, but the grander vision is much more than that. And I do want to allow you guys to sort of share your vision for your users for 2025 as well. So please do. What's coming up at Eclipse? Did we lose some? There he's there.
No, I'm still here. I'm still here, still alive. Yeah, awesome question. So we did start off obviously in launches, and it's still a focus of ours. We still believe that there's merit to the launch space, and there's been a lot of issues in the launch space for sure over the last few years in terms of like predatory actors and the way it's set up. And so we definitely still have that. We are going, opening up some more permissionless elements of the launch space. So even though we'll be doing some sort of regular launches that are curated, we are going down the route that allows for like a lot, bring in more volume, allowing for more like crowdfunding at a more like semi-permissionless way. So that's definitely one of the things I'm excited about. The next thing that we kind of are looking at and that we've been looking at going into is I've been getting really excited about like yield aggregation and different opportunities for yield on chain. And then how do we package that and how do we like simplify that so that we can eventually bring this into like a very simple app experience for new users, and Chain Abstraction, everything like that's going to make this like really powerful. As I said before, I point back to kind of the Terra days and what was beautiful about like apps like Alice Finance that were just kind of like Venmo payment applications, but with extra features built in. And so I imagine like kind of this moving much towards like this simplified end user experience where someone uses it like they would a regular Web2 app, but they do get access to kind of all the benefits of multiple different DeFi rails built into one. And so that's something that I get excited about, and I think is the direction that we really want to go on. And we just have to build up some of the pillars and some of the verticals that we need to get to that end goal. But I would love to I envision kind of a sort of like an easy Venmo payment application that has savings inbuilt, similar to what Spaceship was in I don't know if you ever used Spaceship, Matt, in Acorn. Spaceship in Australia. It's kind of one of these apps where you could like chuck in your paycheck over every week a certain amount, and you could allocate that to specific baskets. So I think about that a lot. And I think about like what you could do with that mixed with token launches a little bit. I think it'd be really cool to be able to play around with like launch pools and baskets of new token launches, and then allowing people to use their yield towards those. So I just want to go and get experimenting with some of that stuff and just going into like the aggregation route for yields and savings and stuff, but then simplifying it to like a very, very consolidated level. But we still have a bit of road to get to that. I know we've got a Chain Abstraction stuff now, but there's still a lot of rails that need to actually be kind of worked on and consolidated to get to this state. But I think that's the direction that we really want to go in. I think it's going to be good to be able to bring DeFi to the people rather than people to DeFi.
I think you're going about it the right way, right? Because you guys have been sort of traditionally doing launches, I guess, for maybe over 12 months, even more. So you've got these people coming in looking for new experiences in cryptos. Obviously, an IDO launchpad is not necessarily the first thing people do when they come to crypto. Maybe they come in, they buy some Bitcoin and some Ethereum, some blue chips, right? And they just hold it in a wallet, and that's their experience. And then as they start to come in more, they find things like launchpads. So I think that's a great way to get a core community and then start to bring in these other features and then create these app experiences that you're doing, you have people that you've been educating over time, right? Because you talked about that at the start of the call, right? This kind of idea of learning to earn, and you're kind of doing it.
It's a good point what you said, because you kind of get, I noticed this in Terra as well, you kind of get these entry layers. Some people come in and they sort of dabble and then they just stay at that level. But some people start to dabble and they want to go deeper. And you saw this in Terra actually with Anchor protocols. So I said, as much as a giant Ponzi, people come into Anchor and a lot of people are happy, like just chilling at Anchor. But some of us decided, hey, I want to learn more about this. Like, what can I do more than this? And so then they filter down into kind of the layers. So I think kind of approaching that angle, but it's a little bit challenging because that consumer is not back in crypto yet. And, you know, if they do come back in, then, you know, that's going to be a great opportunity to have that. But we have to figure out how to build the house of cards and position from a messaging, marketing, positioning product perspective of like, what do you build, like the cart before the horse? Or, you know, do you go out and build like a really simple, you know, app interface with sort of these DeFi things inbuilt, but then you don't have the scalable yield aggregation that you need to plug into the back end of it, right? So you kind of turn around and go, okay, you need to actually build out those rails for yield aggregation to then be able to plug into that. It's kind of probably a similar chicken and eggs thing with the infrastructure, right? It's like you start building apps, you realize the infrastructure is not there, and so you go build infrastructure to then be able to build better apps. So we're kind of in this kind of place where we're experimenting and evolving of how we position and how we message and how we actually roll this out in the way. How do we get to, what is the road towards that end vision, right? And it's not always clear.
I think it's an exciting time for us too in that sense though, because we've doubled down on Neutron. Like we're very, very close to that team, and they're the blockchain that we're built on. And these guys have been very similar to yourselves, where it's like just working like horses in the background and really trying to bring in the right people to surround themselves to make themselves very, very strong for the long term. So even though they're not in the limelight right now, it's something where they've got a lot of strong DeFi builders, and like some of the founders of Lido come across, but they've got really strong DeFi projects that are building, and there's liquidity on the sidelines there waiting to enter. They're just waiting until the space gets to a stage where it's like, okay, it's now primed, it's now ready, and there's some strong applications there that we can move with. So that team themselves, they're focused heavily on strong DeFi apps for 2025, and we're going to be working with those guys like very aggressively to understand what strategies they're wanting to implement and how we can help support. So I think our 2025 it's going to be very bullish.
I think Neutron suits us well in some elements. I mean, a lot of people, Neutron's not a very well-known chain, and you know, it's been kind of under the bubble of Cosmos. I think what really excites me about Neutron and sort of what their thesis is, I guess if you summarize Neutron's thesis, it's like giving apps superpowers. So enabling apps to kind of do things outside of just their VM. So, you know, a lot of people are going out and building rollups or app chains because they need more customizability, or they need more things than just a regular VM. Neutron allows for doing more with regular smart contract applications, which brings in, I guess, like new utilities. So, you know, that will definitely be using some of those elements like, you know, cron module and some of these others within the application. But I think it also, it will kind of lead towards a more efficient app experience for DeFi builders and things like that. And I think like there's a lot more quality I'm seeing, because I see a lot of like kind of layer one chains that sort of just building the same copy pasta, and their only advantage is slightly different. I think the challenges come down to distribution, like a Base, Solana, some of these other chains have a lot more distribution, have a lot more builders, have a lot more kind of money behind them. So that definitely helps on that front. But if we think that the space is going to be an aggregated space anyway, and somewhat like, you know, some chains may have advantages in terms of liquidity and distribution, but if you can build like apps that are better or more efficient based on the underlying tech, then do you eventually end up, you know, as a leading player within that aggregation, if everything is abstracted anyway. So yeah, we'll see where that goes for sure. But like we are just going to keep building and building the blocks in the way that we need to build them and discovering that journey.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I hear that there's an info project going around that lets you build anywhere and access everywhere, Simon. So if you do need to, you know, get across to some of these other ecosystems, you know where to find us. But I think you guys are also going at it the right way, right? Because I make this comparison between like ChatGPT and like, let's say what you guys are building, right? I drop ChatGPT, anyone can use it, right? Anyone can write a prompt the same way that you would write into Google, and you can start playing with that product. You can put it anywhere and people are going to find benefit from it. But I think it's smart with what you guys are doing. It gives you time to build in front of people that are already passionate about DeFi in sort of the DeFi summer mindset, sort of like the OG DeFi mindset compared to sort of newer users coming in. So you get to build there with the support of those other builders doing other DeFi projects, the support of Neutron. And then, as you're saying, there's infra like what we're doing at SEDA, basically, allowing you to build somewhere and then access somewhere else, so that you can put your application on an unknown chain or a relatively unknown chain or new networks if you spin them up tomorrow. But then it doesn't mean that you're cut off and siloed and fragmented from bigger chains like Base and Solana that have lots of users. So I think like everything for you guys, fingers crossed, and the puzzle comes together, and that infra is available to you as you guys sort of get through 2025. As you said, there's a lot of building.
That's a scaling thing for us, right? Like we do see that need, but we didn't want to do that too early either. But it does help, right? If you want to access and tap into liquidity like Solana and these other chains, you want to be able to do that. But we just haven't. Like it's like you can't do everything at once, right? And so I think like cross-chain scaling is like we're sort of like still hunting for that product market fit and adjusting kind of who we are and what we're building, and then we'll look at kind of that scaling and expansion.
Yeah, it makes sense. And if anyone wants to get on board what you guys are doing, you guys have a very active Discord and TG, a lot of fun in there. I often go in there to get my degen fix. Otherwise, jump on to your guys' Twitter at Eclipse Fi. Simon and Sam both very active in those groups. So if you have any other questions, Dante, appreciate your 1,000 questions in the Telegram on what SEDA is. We will get to them one by one. Might take me the better half of this day. So looking forward to getting in there. Simon and Sam, thanks guys. I know it's late where you guys are, so appreciate you coming on. Any final words for the punters?
Nah, just excited for your next steps and bring on mainnet. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
I'm holding 100%. My bag, so let's go.
Simon, chat, guys. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Awesome, guys. All right, we'll be back on Thursday with RouteScan. Looking forward to diving back down the stack as well. So thank you all, and we'll catch you in a few days.
Thanks, legends.
Thanks.